paper reports that two of the male prostitutes were given a late-night tour of the White House last year.
I think I'm entitled.
You want answers.
I want the truth.
You can't handle the truth.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Nick Bryant Podcast. Many times in life, we find that our heroes are ethical eunuchs. We saw American Sniper paint a sociopathic Chris Kyle into a heroic, honorable light. We've also seen monsters like Hugh Hefner cultivate superlative reputations while they're alive, and their viciousness only emerges posthumously. And Alfred Kinsey, we have both. He died in 1956, and a 2004 movie portrayed him as a righteous researcher, even though he truly was a monster. And today, my guest is Dr. Beverly Newman, and she's going to edify us about Alfred Kinsey. How you doing today?
I'm always busy researching to protect children. And the Kinsey Institute and Alfred Kinsey are at the top of the list.
Well, Alfred Kinsey, he's the most famous sex researcher in the world. And he received unprecedented attention from his book, Sexual Behavior in the Human Male in 1945 or 1948, and Sexual Behavior in the Human Female in 1953. According to James Jones, Kinsey's biographer, Kinsey was having sex with other men and arranging his wife, Clara, to be filmed having sex with Kinsey Institute staff members. Kinsey's sexual addiction escalated to performing acts of severe sadomasochism on himself, on film. So give us a little background on Alfred Kinsey.
It's the darkest, most hideous biography that you can even fathom. This is a man trained in Harvard who went down a road of no return. As you were just indicating, sexual addiction, sadomasochism, any kind of sexual perversion, he condoned, he promoted, and of course, child adult sex, bestiality, and he collected and funded, or let's say, paid for sexual data on the torture of infants and children, toddlers, as young as 2 months old.
On page 75 of Kinsey's first book are tables of experimental data about babies and children containing such telltale phrases as based on actual observations. Table 30 details the sexual responses of hundreds of babies and children. Table 31 records observations of 317 males from age 2 months to 15 years old. Table 32 records observations of 188 boys from 5 months to adolescence and times their sexual responses with a stopwatch. Why don't you fill us in on some of that data, Beverly?
These were predators of very, very young children, including Holocaust children. And the Interpol, years later, the international police actually came after one of the predators of Holocaust children, and he was eventually imprisoned. Kinsey was working with this predator, what they call a serial predator. And the other data, if you want to call it, and it's not scientific research, they claim it's scientific research because they did these horrific experiments. Where is the informed consent of a 2-month-old infant? Where is it? Where is the ability to move and have freedom? Some of these children went into convulsions. So if this is what they call, and they still do, and at Indiana University, where unfortunately I technically have my degree of doctorate. However, I never went on that campus once I learned the truth about Kinsey. Kinsey is lauded, applauded. They just celebrated 75 years of the Kinsey Institute. And I mean, a year-long celebration. They put up a huge bronze statue of a man who promoted in any way possible and paid for the sexual torture of children. So I don't know what else needs to be said other than his wife and his staff and the media and law enforcement and leaders of the Indiana University were and are, in many cases, still complicit in horrid crimes against completely helpless children. Horrid crimes. And by and large, these were poor children that they would get from charities, etc.
And you wrote that Kinsey and his colleagues encouraged predatory behavior by purchasing data from sexual predators, training them accurately to time their captive subjects, and are personally conducting the experiments themselves. Somewhere in the history and secrecy of the Kinsey Institute are answers to these questions. What are the biggest questions that you have?
When I first heard about Kinsey, I said to myself, this can't be true. You know, I was born and raised in Indiana, and here I am confronted with information that sounds completely, totally impossible, inconceivable. So I go downtown to the Indiana University Medical Center library and pull Kinsey's books off the shelves and start reading. Everything is true. Everything is true. So my biggest concern or question you're asking is how in the world, to this very day, when we know the truth, it's incontrovertible, can people have thousands and millions of adherents to an ideology that permits and extols and lauds heinous crimes on children? How can that happen? And it is, even as of today, Indiana University has got such an enormous, not only financial, but social and otherwise investment in Alfred Kinsey and the Kinsey Institute to promote this ideology. And they call it now sexual diversity. Well, sexual diversity that includes torturing children is criminal. Criminal.